Welcome, one and all, to this latest edition of the Future So Right podcast. I am your host, Pete Beal, and this is a Green Flame Press production. So we're back. I have to apologize and offer a little bit of an explanation as to why I wasn't here last week when normally I would be. My wife was involved in, fortunately, a fairly minor car accident, but she was injured, and it's been a little bit of a hassle dealing with everything. The other driver was at fault, but for whatever reason, their insurance company is trying to fight us on that, even though we have actual video footage of the accident. So that's been a bit of a mess, but we'll get it all sorted out one way or another. So, welcome back. If you follow me on social media, particularly Instagram, you might already have a pretty good idea of what this episode's going to be about. So, in anticipation of my upcoming release, I thought I would do a series of episodes about the publishing process as I go through it. So I'm hoping that this will help other first-time authors when they eventually turn to going through this experience themselves of publishing their own work. Learn a little bit from my mistakes. If I identify areas where I wish I had done things differently, you'd better believe I'll go ahead and share those with you. So from now through the end of September, that's what the focus of this podcast is going to be. We're going to continue with the bi-weekly episodes. I am sharing on my YouTube the upcoming schedule of the topics for these episodes. I've also shared it on my social media, so if you're not following me there, make sure you do so. If you have any specific questions or comments you'd like to make, especially in regards to any of these topics, you can do so via my website, petebeal.com. It's going to be linked down below. You can fill out the form. If you don't want me to say your name, you can just check a little box. I won't say your name, but I would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and opinions about the topics that are about to be discussed over the coming weeks. One last request before we really dive into things. If you like the content today, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. That way you'll get notified as soon as I drop a new episode. So with that being said, let's jump right into things. Our topic of the day is going to be commonly overlooked steps to the publishing process. Now, I'm going to be self-publishing, so this series is largely going to be focused in that direction, but today we're going to be talking a bit about steps that people tend to overlook when they're looking at the process as a whole. Maybe when they're first starting out, it's not the kind of thing that enters their mind, right? We all know that we're going to need to get cover art. We all know that we're going to need to upload our books and get them set up for, say, ebook or print book format. These are things we know are going to happen. But there are smaller steps along the way that might not enter our minds, and so by discussing a few of these right up front, hopefully will help some people with their planning process. Okay, so I think I've rambled on enough for an intro. Let's dive right in. Now, when I say this first step, some of you are probably going to roll your eyes a little bit, but let me explain myself. To me, the most overlooked step to the publishing process is writing a book. Okay, hold on, stay with me here. The reason I say that is because a lot of the people who have questions about the publishing process are people who have not yet started writing a book. And here's what happens. These people want to write a book. They want to get it out in the world. They want to share their talent, their creativity. But then they start doing research before they write the book. How do I publish a book? And inevitably, they're going to see these massive lists that come up with Google of all these steps, all these potential costs that are going to be incurred in the process, and they immediately get discouraged before they've ever put a word on paper, and they give up right out of the gate. Don't do this. I'm going to say this right now. If you're listening to this and you've not yet started writing your book, go do that instead of listening to the rest of this episode. Then come back and listen to the rest of this episode once you have a first draft. What's so important is once you have that first draft, you're not going to publish that draft. It's probably going to be garbage. No offense. Mine was too. I get it. But what's going to happen is you're going to come and you're going to start doing this research. Maybe take a little break between your first and second draft and start looking into a little bit. Okay, how do I go about getting this published eventually? You're going to see these steps and it's still going to be daunting, but you're going to realize that after what you went through writing the first draft, it's really not so bad. And you've put so much blood, sweat, and tears into doing this that of course you're not going to mind going through these steps. So I don't want to waste a lot of time with that, but it's something that I just wanted to bring up right out of the gate because there's so many people that go out there and just give up before they even start because they're so intimidated by the publishing process. Please don't do this. Write your book first. Write at least your first draft, then start researching. Okay? Don't let yourself get discouraged. Now, something that gets overlooked a bit because not everyone necessarily needs to worry about this step is obtaining ISBN numbers. So first off, what is an ISBN number? An ISBN stands for International Standard Book Number, which I certainly did not have to Google to figure out. So it's basically, if you look at any book on your shelf, I'm just pulling a random book here off my shelf, The Summer Dragon by Todd Lockwood, great book, highly recommend. There's going to be a number on the barcode, and that's going to be your ISBN number. It's just what identifies your book to sellers. Now, you can look up and really dive into what the 13 digits all mean, but it's not really important to what we're talking about here today. But it is something that you might need to acquire, and you may need to pay for this. So if you are only going to be self-publishing on Amazon, you don't necessarily need to purchase ISBN numbers because they offer them for free. However, if you want to go for a wider release through more sellers, you're going to need to obtain ISBN numbers. Note I said ISBN numbers, not an ISBN number. So why is that? Each different version of your book needs its own unique number. If you have a paperback and hardcover, they're going to need their own unique numbers. An audiobook is going to need its own unique number. Make sense? Now, I'll dive more into the cost of ISBNs a bit more in the next episode where I'm going to be talking about the costs of publishing. However, in the US, I'll just tell you they're about $95 for one, or you can buy a pack of 10 for, I believe it's $295. In other countries, I know there are cheaper options. In some countries, it might be more expensive. So, you can see how an ISBN is something that's very easily overlooked, right? It's just a little number that goes on the barcode on the back of your book. But it's the kind of thing that if you need it, that's the kind of thing you don't want to discover a week before your release date, right? When you go to upload your book and it's asking you for this ISBN number and you have no idea what that is, that could throw quite a wrench in your plans, right? So just make sure you have your ISBNs all squared away. Again, if you're going to only be publishing on Amazon, which a lot of people do, you can use their free ISBNs that they provide. Just make sure you're reading the fine print involved with that, knowing what the rules are, and things like that. That's not an option that I have elected to take. I wanted to go with a bit of a wider release, so I went ahead and bought my own. I bought a block of 10, so I'm going to be good going forward for my next few releases. So, just a step to think about. Plan for it. You know, with all of these publishing steps, I find the best thing you can do is put together a schedule. Figure out your publishing date 6 months in advance, and then just put these steps on different dates, so you're spreading them out, so you're not getting stressed out all at once. And you're thinking, okay, on this day, I need to make sure I have my ISBN squared away. And then it's done well in advance, and you don't have to stress out about it. Next, we're going to dive into another step that's really easy to overlook, and it's a step that not everyone is even going to take, but I think it's worth mentioning here. And that step is registering your copyright of your work. Now, to be clear, as soon as you write your work, you are the owner of that work. And essentially, it's copyrighted to you. Here's the issue. Unless you register that copyright with a federal agency, in the US we have the Copyright Office, that's going to be a copyright that you're not really going to be able to enforce. Now, I want to stress, the odds of anyone stealing your work are extremely slim. They're not zero, but they are extremely slim. You might not need to do this. However, for peace of mind, if you want to know that 10 years from now you see somebody else selling your work and, touting it as their own, that you could go after them for compensation, sue them in court, it might be worth the peace of mind to pay a little bit of money and register your copyright with the government. Then you'll have an enforceable copyright, and if someone does steal your work, you could potentially come up with compensation from them for that. You can pay companies to do this for you. It's not a complicated process. It's actually quite easy to do on your own. There's a lot of guides out there if you look it up and sort of work your way through the ads of companies trying to get you to pay double the amount so that they'll do it for you. Just look into that. It's not difficult, but it's something that I felt was worth mentioning. Again, the odds of you ever having to use a copyright are extremely slim. I feel like I can't say that enough times. But if you're the kind of person that just worries about that kind of thing, or if you just want to have all your ducks in a row and make sure that you're good, you have nothing to worry about in the future, it's a little bit of money that is paying for peace of mind. So, something to look into, registering your copyright with the government. Let's dive right into the next overlooked step of publishing. And it's one that I feel is probably going to be the most immediately noticeable to a reader if you forget this step. And here's the thing, you can actually publish your book without completing this step. There's nothing that's going to stop you from doing it, but you will regret it. For this exercise, let's again pick up the closest book that we can find. Once again, I have the Summer Dragon. And when I open it, I can't help but notice that these pages look so uniform. You know what I mean? You see how in the book you're holding, every page, the paragraphs come out the exact same distance towards the edge. They start the exact same distance from the top. They come down the exact same distance on the page. The paragraphs are all formatted the same. They're all in the same font. The spacing between the lines is consistent. It's all just clean, right? It has a very uniformed look. It looks this way because somebody put a lot of time and effort into formatting this book properly. And you should too. Okay. If somebody opens your book and it's not properly formatted, they're going to know that immediately. It's going to be very, very apparent. And it's going to be a big turnoff to any regular reader. essentially it's going to scream, I'm an amateur and I don't know what I'm doing. Is that fair? Maybe not necessarily, but it's the truth of the matter. Now, there are people who will do this for you, not for free, obviously. You'll need to pay them. Or you can learn to do this yourself, which is what I did. But please, 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 please format your book properly. Make sure your pages have a neat, clean, uniformed appearance. It should be easy to read, easy on the eyes. It should, if you open, again, any book on your shelf, essentially it should look somewhat similar, right? It should be indistinguishable. You shouldn't be able to tell that you did this yourself. A few more things in regards to the formatting that you want to be aware of. Page numbers are standard. Headers are standards. For example, your name at the top of one page, the title of your book at the top of the other page. So when you flip through, there's always those at the top. Chapter headings should be consistent. You're not required to have your headers and your page numbers on the first page of a new chapter. When you start a new chapter or a new scene, you're not required to indent. However, all of your other paragraphs should be indented, and they should be indented consistently, consistent amount every single time. There are a lot of tutorials out there, or as I said, you could always hire somebody to do this for you if this is a step you don't want to learn for yourself, but it's so critical that you get this right. Now, you may want more details from me that I'm not necessarily able to give you. For example, how big should my margins be? Well, I can't answer that because I don't know your book. Each genre has its own standards. Your trim size is going to play a part. For example, a 5x8 book might have a slightly different margin than a 6x9 book. My best advice would be to pick up books that are similar to your own and see what they did, right? What are their margins? Go with as close to the industry standard as you can. Formatting isn't something that you want to be noticed, essentially. You don't need to go out there and do anything too over the top with it. You can if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. But from my point of view, the best thing about good formatting is that nobody even thinks about it. I don't want anybody to think about, oh, I wonder what he did with the formatting as soon as they open my book. The priority is the story, not what the inside of the book actually looks like. So make it blend in with any other book in your genre and you're going to be just fine. But it's not something you want to forget because you will regret if you publish your book without properly formatting it. The next step that we're going to dive into is one that you might not realize you've missed until after your book is published, and that's why I really wanted to bring it up, or at least touch on it a little bit here. We're actually going to be doing a full episode on this topic on August, it's slated for release on August 27th. So, one of the most common questions you will hear a most recently published author ask: why is nobody buying my book? I put it out there, I hit publish, and it's got one sale, and that was my mom. It's something that we don't tend to think about all of the hard work that goes into getting people to buy books. So of course I'm referring to marketing and promotion. These are so important to the publishing process, and you need to start this before your book is out there. The best chance that your book is ever going to have to sell is close to its release. That's when the most opportunity is there to sell the most copies. That's not to say you can't have a hit that happens later, but statistically, if you look at just cold hard facts, most books sell the most copies shortly after release. So it's so important to market your book in advance of its release. Get a buzz going. Well, how do you do that? Well, here's the thing. The first step you need to take is to come back here on August 27th, and we're going to talk about that more in depth because this is not an episode about marketing and promotion. So just make sure you come back for that episode. I'm going to be sharing my own experiences, all the ways in which I've crashed and burned in this regard, and we're going to discuss them. And we're going to discuss what works, what doesn't. And there's no one size fits all solution. I'm not going to be able to tell you one thing and say, if you do this, you will sell 1 million copies. There are a whole lot of people out on the internet that are telling you things like that. It's almost inevitable that you're going to run into this. Oh, just follow my 14-step program and you'll be a millionaire off your writing. Listen, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. There is no magic formula. You're going to have to find what works for you, just like I'm going to have to find what works for me. But by coming back on August 27th, hopefully you can get just a little bit ahead of the curve. What's most important, though, is that you not just neglect to do it entirely. That is the worst possible option you can take. So no matter what, make sure you're putting some effort into the marketing and promotion of your books. And again, in case I haven't said the date enough, August 27th, we'll have a full episode about just marketing and promotion. And if you hit the subscribe button, you'll find out, like as soon as it comes out. How cool is that? Our next overlooked step is a sort of a quick one, and it sort of ties into marketing, and that is book metadata. Now, I'm not going to take too deep of a dive into metadata, but let's talk a little bit about what it is. It's essentially the information about your book that exists online. Things like titles, page count, cover dimensions, etc. And it also contains keywords, categories, descriptions. So why are these important? Well, they're important because how do search engines work? If you go to Google and you type in something, how does that work? Let's say you're looking for a horror novel on Google. Your keywords, your categories, your descriptions, these are all things that can be used for what's known as SEO, or search engine optimization. You're making your book more visible. Now, any sort of publishing platform and any sort of retailer is going to require you to submit metadata, so you're not really going to miss this step, but what you might miss is how important it is to selling your book. So let's plan on looping back to metadata a little bit on August 27th when we release the marketing episode, but I wanted to mention it. Get out there and start doing your research now. Learn how it works and how it can be used to grow your audience and help people find your book. It's one of the great tools out there, and it's one that I think a lot of authors don't really put a lot of thought into, and I think that's a real shame. A lot of missed opportunity out there. So what else might people forget when they're going through the publishing process? Well, how about front and back matter? So, wait, what's front and back matter? Well, once again, if you open that book, you'll notice that when you open the cover, it doesn't typically start right at chapter 1, page 1, right? There are things that come first. There are things like a dedication page. There are things like a copyright page. Your book might have a map. If you need a map, that would be considered front matter. Sometimes authors like to put little notes in the front or in the back thanking their readers. A lot of authors like to put an acknowledgement section in the back of their book. What about those little about the author, little one paragraph things that you typically see at the end of the book? How about a page listing if you have multiple releases? Well, the front matter is a great place to advertise those, isn't it? You could have a little also by this author page there, detailing all the titles that you have out. Link them to your website, your social media. These are things that don't just happen on their own. You have to put these in, and they're things that they're not really things we think about while we're writing, right? We're just worried about our story. So, don't underestimate the importance of your front and your back matter. Some people might view them as a little bit of a hassle, but they're just another way to make your book your own, right? Your dedication, your about your author, your map, these are great ways to just really give your book its own unique character. So don't underestimate their importance. And certainly don't forget about them until the time comes to upload your book. Another thing, in terms of the front matter, with most books, and again, I'm pulling up an example, when you open your book, the first page is often going to be the title of the book. Well, why do I need the title of the book? It's on the freaking cover. Why do we have to put it again? I know. I get it. It's redundant. We all understand. We're paying by the page. We get it. But you want your book to appear professional. If that's the standard, do it. You're going to appear professional. Put your title and your author name on your front page in the same format as it's on your cover. Even better, have your cover artist get you a ping of exactly what they use and then just insert it as an image and you're good to go. So, front matter, back matter, don't forget about them. This is going to lead us right into the next step, which I don't think it's overlooked so much as it gets postponed. And I just want to talk about that and advise you not to postpone it. And that is your blurb, aka that little 1 or 2 paragraphs that you put on the back of your book or in your inside flap or on Amazon or whatever that essentially describes what your book is about. You have what? 200 or 300 words to convince somebody to buy your book. You're not going to forget to do this, but don't put it off. It's going to take you a while to get this right. You're going to need feedback from beta readers, from people. Get their opinions on it, rework it, get their opinions again, rework it again until you have something you're happy with. This was a painful process for me. It's one that took me, I probably could have written about 3 or 4 chapters of a book in the time it took me to write these stupid 2 paragraphs. So I would just recommend not putting it off for too long. You're not going to overlook it, but just my personal advice, be thinking about that when you're going through the editing process, when you're going through your second and third drafts. Maybe throw something together and just go back and work on it every now and then, so that by the time you actually need it, you have a really solid version that you're actually happy with. So now that we've gone over some of these things, I just wanted to touch a little bit on what you can do to help keep track of all of these things. So we've talked about quite a few different overlooked steps of publishing today. In fact, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like about 7 different things. Now, it's one thing to watch this or listen to this podcast and think you have them all down, but when you stop listening, you're inevitably probably going to forget a little bit of what you heard. So what can you do to help keep track of these things? I recommend one of 2 things. They're really the same thing, but there's a few different ways of doing it. Go out and buy either a calendar or a monthly planner and plot these out well in advance. Calendar works great. You can pick one up for just a few bucks at pretty much any store. I went a little bit more expensive, got a planner. I think I paid like $12 for it. And what that had was essentially a calendar inside of it, along with more detailed pages if I needed to write more detailed things on each date. And go about 6 months out. Set yourself a publishing schedule of a few months and just space these things out. That way they don't hit you all at once. You're not getting overwhelmed, but you have a very clear schedule for when these things need to be done. And if you're only doing one of these, say every 2 or 3 weeks, it's not overwhelming you. It's just one small step every few weeks. And when you get close to your release, you'll thank yourself in the long run for getting them done well in advance. So that's just what I do, and I think it helps anyone. A planner, a calendar, some way to keep track of all these different things that you need to get done. So, with that, dear listeners, I think I'm going to bring this episode to a close. As I mentioned at the onset of this episode, this is the first of a series of episodes that are going to be focused sort of intensively on the publishing process and lessons that I've learned throughout my publishing process that'll hopefully help you a little bit. If you look on your screen now, I'm going to put the schedule of the upcoming episodes up so you can sort of see the dates that are to come and what the next topics are going to be. As you can see, our next topic is going to be the costs of self-publishing. How much money does this whole endeavor take? Well, tune in next time and I will let you know. Once again, I'll just remind you, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, the website is petebeal.com, also linked in the description below, as are my social media platforms. If you like the content today, please hit that thumbs up button. It makes a big difference, and feel free to subscribe if you'd like to be notified anytime I put out new content. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up. We'll be back in 2 weeks talking about the costs of self-publishing. Until then, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay creative, and always keep writing. Thank you.